Through hard work and determination, I've had the privilege and the honor of living in the big red dot known as Japan. After over a decade here, I have had a chance to experience this incredibly rich culture, its passion for art and aesthetics. But just like every country in the world, below the surface lies Japan's dark side. Efficient, hardworking, and steeped in tradition. This is the Japan most of us know, a culture that is so innovative in its technology, style, and avant-garde that it often is revered entirely as a form of entertainment, rather than the amazing people that actually make up this great nation. But what happens when the relentless work, the unyielding push for next-level progress in all industries, and the high maintenance of polite and universally known manners become too much for an individual in this first world metropolis? Hikikomori, Japan's word for the modern shut-in and recluse. I first arrived and began my journey within Japan February 14th, 2007. And when I first got here, for me, it was a 3-month honeymoon period in which I loved, watched, saw, ate, and smelled everything in Japan and enjoyed all of it. There was nothing I could find wrong with this country, and I loved everything about it. There was no aspect that I would ever want to change. There was no Western part of my life that I wanted to implement upon my journey to Japan. There wasn't anything I missed from home, and it was a candy land for me. And it wasn't really until I had been here about 2 years, and there was a favorite cafe/bar I had, and I would go to every night below my apartment that I lived at, and there was a guy named Hiro Toyama. I remember his name perfectly. He was a partial English speaker who could speak kind of broken English, and my Japanese was pretty much broken Japanese at that point too. So we had a good time communicating and learning a lot about each other's culture. I have to say, Hiro taught me a lot of what I know now. And then, suddenly out of nowhere, his shop was closed for 1 day, and then 1 week, and then 1 month, which dragged on into 2 years. I started to wonder if his shop was totally closed. What was happening with Hiro? What was going on with his cafe, his bar at night? Did he quit? Did someone else take it over? Well, I come to find out, about 2011, the shop opens up again one day. And he's there serving just a couple people. It's a bar that only seats about 5. I walk in there and, Scotto-san. And he's super happy to see me. And I'm, of course, happy to see Hiro. Where have you been for the last 2 years? I thought you quit. I thought you closed your business. I thought this whole gig was over. No. I find out he was Hikikomori. I looked at him with a very puzzled look because I had never heard this word in Japan before, even after having been here almost 3 years. Well, what is Hikikomori? And he didn't have a quick English translation for that because that was far too complex for his English and too complex for my Japanese. So we ended up Google translating it together. That's when I finally learned about what Hikikomori was. And it said recluse, it said shut-in. And I asked him, so you didn't go out of your house? And he said, well, Scott, I did. I waited till midnight and I would go out to get one meal at the konbini. I would come back and eat ramen, eat hot noodles, eat teriyaki, and the rest of my day was spent inside of my room in my mother's house, not going out. According to current government figures, there are nearly 1 million Japanese who have answered this stressful societal question of what to do when Japan's social norms and overworked occupations become too much by locking themselves away in their bedrooms and 1 LDK apartments. And I asked him, what would ever cause you to do this? And he said, it all happened one night when he was told off by a very aggressive customer. Someone was very unsatisfied with the food or the drink. I don't know exactly what the situation was. And they had a good yell at Hiro. Kind of a soul-crushing yell, if you will. And that was enough to shut him down for 2 years. And I thought, wow, 2 years over a customer complaint, I mean, that seems a bit extreme. Although numbers vary between experts who study the social phenomenon known as Hikikomori, there are a few aspects all of them agree on. Number one, there are between 700,000 to 1.2 million Hikikomori shut-ins within Japan, in a population of 127 million people. Number two, the average age of the Hikikomori is between 15 to 30 years and is mostly male. Number three, some of the most extreme cases have shown certain Hikikomori to stay locked away from all forms of human interaction, including their own family, mothers and fathers, for as long as 15 to 20 years. I came to find out more after researching it that this tends to be a lot of the reasons why people end up going hikikomori. Societal pressures in Japan. It can be anything from a customer having a good yell at them, to a boss reprimanding them, to even being bullied by a peer at work. And so I decided I needed to research further because I was clueless with what this topic was, with what causes made it happen, with what concerns Japan needs to have, and why this is a phenomenon mostly only seen in Japan. Now, don't get me wrong when I say this happens in other countries, but it does not happen to the extent that it happens in Japan. And the reason, and this is just me totally spitballing right here, I'm not backing this up with years of college research, consensus. This comes from me interviewing multiple hikikomoris who came out of their shell after anywhere from 2 years to the longest one I ever interviewed was one gone for over 10 years. And they were all male. They were anywhere from 25 to I think the oldest one I interviewed was the man who had been locked away for 10 years was 45. And they said what it came from for them was the fact they shut down and they lost a sense of what is called the Tatemae and the Honne in Japan. These are two very separate and very dichotomized paths that Japanese constantly walk in Japan. The Honne is how we act when we are inside our houses. It is ourselves, our true selves. We laugh at the jokes we think are funny. Maybe we even make a couple rude ones ourselves. We can kid around with close family members and friends. But when we leave and we go out to work, we have the Tatemae. The Tatemae is our outside face. It is us learning to put on a smile each and every day, for us to make sure we have good customer rapport, constantly saying, yes, I will try harder, yes, I will do better, or as they say in Japan, gamansuru, which means push through the hardships that I face at work. I will gambaru, try my hardest to make it through the work day. I will push through these 10 to 12 hour work days that I get in Japan, and I will make it through showing my utmost best face the whole time I am out at work with the Tatemae. And when they were no longer able to do this, when it became too soul-crushing from either a reprimand from a boss or a scolding from a customer, they shut down. Now, I'm not saying this is the reason for every single hikikomori case in Japan. There are many other reasons. Like I said, there's the Honne and the Tatemae. There's many, many situations where you constantly have to put on a smile and a very friendly and polite voice all throughout Japan, on the phone, in any sort of business situation. And this is stressful. I'm not saying it's always coming from a scolding or a reprimand, but it is almost all of the time coming from having to put on this tatemae face, this outside face, not using your Honne face. You cannot come to work in Japan sad about things like even a funeral of a close family member. You cannot come in sad from work or aggravated or upset because you just had a fight with your wife in the morning. You need to come in there, you need to turn that smile on, and you need to show that tatemae outside face. And that becomes too much for some people after a while. For some, this makes them hikikomori. To fully understand and show the differences of the word of hikikomori from other countries' societal shut-ins and recluses, one of the most and first needs for the breakdown of the word is to tackle the problems that concern this label and what exactly the word means. First off, hiki. Hiki is the Japanese word for pull. In this case, it is meant to represent a person pulling themselves into a state or place or shell away from society as a whole. As far as aspects of the definition are concerned, one must follow Japan's Ministry of Health textbook definition, which is as follows. Number 1, spending almost every day confined to their home or bedroom. Number 2, a marked and persistent avoidance of all social situations, including interactions with close family members. Number 3, symptoms that result in a cut from normal routines, such as holding a job, attending academic classes, and neglect of social activities and relationships. Number 4, withdrawal from ego-dystonic symptoms, meaning the shut-in has begun withdrawing to a point that it fractures all basic social elements that allow them to properly live in a human civilization. In the most extreme cases, to the point it harms their own health and life. Number 5, all of the above symptoms and conditions lasting for 6 months or more. Number 6, no other extreme mental or physical conditions, for example, being bedridden, being the reason or cause for withdrawal, but more so a clear set case of Japanese society as a whole being the cause and concern. Having studied the origin and creation as well as the research of the hikikomori label, I have been contacted multiple times via social networks, YouTube, and even other expats looking into the same aspects. This has raised my attention to the matter tenfold and made me very aware that I have to inform many interested in the subject not only of what defines hikikomori, but also what is not hikikomori. For example, MGTOW, an acronym for Men Going Their Own Way, is a statement of self-ownership where the modern man protects his own sovereignty above all else. This covers too many aspects to go into individually, but to paraphrase, many confuse MGTOW's refusal to accept cultural norms for their own financial, spiritual, and emotional protection as withdrawing like a hikikomori. This is by no means the case, nor a good comparison of the hikikomori definition. Next is the herbivore man, also known as the grass-eating man. In Japan, the so-sho-ku-kei danshi, who have no interest in getting married or finding a girlfriend, often labeled for their non-assertive and indifferent attitudes towards desire of the flesh, hence the name herbivore male. Although many refrain from the intimacy of the opposite sex or including themselves in strong relationships with the opposite sex, they do not exclude themselves totally from society, they do not shut themselves inside their rooms, and they do not break off all contact with the outside world. The herbivore male is not hikikomori by symptoms alone. Even the viewers and subscribers of my very own channel tend to be a bit confused at times with what exactly defines a hikikomori. Some often write me that they themselves are hikikomori because all they do is travel from home to their job and interact with no one outside of those two places. This again is not hikikomori completely cut themselves off from society as a whole. No hikikomori has a job. They cannot hold a job because they cannot even get outside of their own house without extreme anxiety. The most a hikikomori would leave their house is only in the most desperate situation, such as hunger or possible physical emergency. Another friend that I got to interview was my friend Lisa, who got to deal with a company that manages cases of hikikomori. The parents, anywhere from their 50s to their 60s, call this company and ask for help and I guess gradually rehabilitating their children on up to full-grown adults, living with them to come outside into the outside world once again. And she said it's amazing how talented and how much skill a lot of these people have who shut themselves away, and how they're holding it all inside because they're too afraid to show it to the world. She told me about this one case where a young man around the age of 26 had been shut in for nearly 4 years since the time he started his first job at 22. And she said her first step to trying to get him to come out was to ask him to build a model car for her. And the reason was because he used to work at an engineering firm, one of the major car companies here in Japan. And so she said, you know, I heard from your parents, you really enjoy making these model cars. Can you make one for me? He refused. He didn't want to talk to her. So she came back again. She said, look, I understand. You don't want to make one for me. You don't even know who I am. But next week I have to go and talk to a bunch of kids at a junior high school about the phenomenon of hikikomori, something you're dealing with right now. And I want to show them some of the skills that you as a hikikomori have that are unfortunately unable to share with the world because you're shut in. Can you at least make a model car for them so I can show them how much skill you have and how much the world has hurt you and kept you in to the point that you are afraid to share this skill? And she said he did it in less than 48 hours. Not even using a model kit, but using pieces of plastic from everything from containers to Tupperware. He put together, she said, the most amazing looking model car she had ever seen. She said it had functioning everything. It had an axle, the wheel could turn back and forth, making the front wheels move. She said even inside when you opened the hood there was a tiny engine. It was incredible. And she said this really let her know just how hard being hikikomori and society has affected these people who are afflicted with all the symptoms of this shut-in and reclusive psychological disdain for the outside world. It's gotten to a point where they themselves, even with amazing skills that are far beyond what the market needs, are unable to face even the smallest bit of trauma that they would have from having this work disapproved, or being scolded for work not being totally perfect, or being asked to just simply do it again. Even though they are at the top level, some of the people who are the best at what they do, even those people become these shut-ins. And that's really when it hit her hard, just how important her job was. And even more so than before, she's extremely dedicated to what she does. The puzzling condition of Japanese hikikomori phenomenon is a very troubling one, to say the least. And by now you're probably asking, what is Japan doing to help at least rehabilitate or stamp out this social stigma? In Japan, hikikomori have been a household word since the 1990s, with experts calling it one of the biggest social health problems plaguing the country. Yet the causes and treatments of the condition, or even whether it's a mental illness or not, remain poorly understood. And while the Japanese government has poured significant funds into helping hikikomori, treatment success rates remain very low. The condition illustrates the difficulty of defining mental illness and raises the question about the role society plays in shaping, allowing, or even creating problematic behavior. Researchers in Fukuoka have set up international collaboration to try and answer some of these questions. Solving the hikikomori riddle has taken on greater urgency in the recent years. Sufferers often are men in their 20s and 30s who would be in the workforce, but are instead at home
supported largely by their parents. Government officials worry about who will take responsibility for long-term hikikomori when their parents retire or die. Fukuoka, a city of 1.5 million, 550 miles southwest of Tokyo, about 4 years ago opened a support center, which the Japanese government requires of every prefecture in the country. Called Yoka Yoka, which means it's okay, don't worry about it, in the local dialect, the one-room support center is linked to a youth employment facility. The center primarily fields phone calls from hikikomori, or, more often, their worried parents. It also offers support groups for hikikomori and their parents. However, only a small number of hikikomori actually show up at the center. Of course, a minority are treated successfully. Nonetheless, staffers say they struggle to find a solution to the problem. Takahiro Kato, a professor in the neuropsychiatry department at Kyushu University in Fukuoka, is working with their support center to study hikikomori in a more rigorous and systematic way. Dr. Kato and a team of Japanese and international collaborators that includes Alan Teo, a psychiatric professor at Oregon Health and Science University, want to better define what hikikomori is exactly. They also hope to understand the social and biological underpinnings of the condition to improve treatments. People who consider themselves hikikomori exhibit a wide range of symptoms, including depressive, autistic, and obsessive-compulsive tendencies. A minority appear addicted to the internet, says Dr. Kato, a 40-year-old psychiatrist. Yoshi, 31, came from a recent hikikomori support group. He says he didn't leave his parents' house for over a year after harassment from his boss at his speech therapy internship, and it led him to quit. After that, he did begin to visit friends occasionally and volunteer at the library, but after 4 years, he still has not held a full-time job. Hikikomori appears to be a condition distinct from other mental illness. Japanese experts say only about half of those with the condition would be diagnosed with a disorder in the U.S. Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual, commonly known as the DSM-5, according to the survey of 4,134 Japanese residents published in Psychiatric Research in 2010. But large-scale survey data on hikikomori remains limited. Some of the variation is likely due to the limited resources in Japan for treating mental health, says Kawano Toru, head of Fukuoka City Mental Health and Welfare Center. Another factor is that there is often less stigma about hikikomori than mental illness considered more severe, such as schizophrenia. So more people are willing to call themselves hikikomori, says Dr. Kato. Dr. Teo, an American fluent in Japanese, has treated several hikikomori-like patients in the U.S. in 2010. He published a proposed diagnostic criteria for the condition. It reported that hikikomori's core feature is social isolation. People should suffer for at least 6 months and should be unhappy about the isolation before being diagnosed with the condition. The team in Fukuoka is now working to develop a standardized interview and questionnaire for assessing and diagnosing hikikomori based on some of Dr. Teo's and others' work. The researchers hope to support or at least refute the many sometimes contradictory theories that exist about hikikomori. Japanese experts point to the strict parenting practices and pressure that children feel to succeed as contributing factors to society. Yet hikikomori often live with their parents, and these parents can be soft in forcing their children to go to school or leave to go to work. They often bring trays of food to the room and allow them to stay in there for long amounts of time. In Western society, it's difficult to understand the situation, Dr. Kato says. Western society parents strongly push their children to go out, but in Japan, parents are strongly afraid to push. Current thinking is that providing hikikomori with positive social interactions will help them reintegrate with the outside world. Michiko Asami, president of the nonprofit that runs Yoka Yoka, welcomes each hikikomori with a big smile and tries to initiate a non-judgmental conversation. Sometimes they sit silently for multiple sessions, and they won't even look at her. Gradually, some do. Hidetoshi Ogawa tries to facilitate interaction by having attendees go around the room and tell a story about something they like to do in a support group that he runs. Once a week, he takes the group to a coffee shop or another outside activity to get them used to social integration again. The methods to treat hikikomori vary. There is little data to support the effectiveness of any approach. Some have used the soft touch of going to the door of a hikikomori and slowly coaxing them out through conversation and dialogue, while there are some companies you can hire that use brute force strong-arm tactics to physically pull a child from the room. Gradually exposing anxious people to what they fear doing is one common treatment also used for social anxiety in the US. Nonetheless, it has not worked as well in Japan. Even the definition of recovery is vague. Yu-chan, a 27-year-old woman who considers herself no longer hikikomori, is working to hone her computer skills to get a job. It would be her very first job. She said she was comfortable speaking, but her face immediately flushed a light pink. She trembled slightly during a brief interview with her group therapist at the local Fukuoka group support center that she goes to each and every week for hikikomori support, discussing the 14 years where she stayed home because during her time at junior high school, she was bullied and harassed by friends. Now, thanks to her hikikomori group's gentle encouragement, she is able to leave the house, though she still has trouble making friends, she says. Others, like Ms. Kimura, appear to respond fully to their treatment. She says she had lost confidence in her academic abilities while going to college. She grew depressed and couldn't fathom the idea of being with people. Though the idea of going to the Hikikomori Center terrified her, Ms. Kimura realized she had to change. Otherwise, she says, she would amount to nothing. The warmth of the people at the Yoka Yoka Center in Fukuoka inspired her to work hard to interact with others and overcome her anxiety. Now she's a staff member at the Fukuoka Youth Employment Center, connected to the nonprofit that staffs Yoka Yoka. As Japan's Ministry of Health and researchers at Fukuoka University and the Yoka Yoka program continue to look into cures and rehabilitation that can further help those suffering from the symptoms of hikikomori, daily groups are springing up as well to help offer support and a community to raise awareness and lure out those still stuck behind the very walls of their bedroom. Nonetheless, it seems just as quickly as Japan tries to tackle, rehab, and find a cure for this very large social problem, new cases spring up daily, as well as new causes for the hikikomori symptoms. Will Japan ever be able to defeat these very vague symptoms and the very nebulous nature of hikikomori itself? Only time and Japan's commitment to mental health and awareness of issues throughout the country will show if the problem of shut-ins and recluses, known as hikikomori, can be stamped out.